Good morning, everyone. I'm very glad of being here and welcome everybody to this seminar. I'm Rosa de la Fuente. I'm Vice Rector for Student Affairs at the Complutense University. I'm also a professor of this faculty of Political Geography and Urban Studies. And for me, it's a pleasure to welcome this seminar, and I'm very happy of having all this room full of people this morning, rainy morning. And let me introduce you the person who are with me in the table, and I will give them the word, and then I will finally give some comments. So first of all, I would like to introduce you Andres Balicer, which is the coordinator for this seminar here at Complutense. It's professor of urban sociology, and I'm really glad of giving him the floor.
Thank you very much, Rosa. Thanks for introducing this seminar, this international symposium. So how I call it. Thank you very much for coming. Most of you, some of you are coming because this is class time, but I'm sure it's going to be very, very interesting and very special session for most of you. Some of you are studying development studies and international relations. Others are learning about cities in the world, in the global north. But I think this is going to be a very, very, very openly interesting session for you. Also, it's a very important moment, I think, not only for me or for the group I direct, HISMAT, the research group, because it's also an introduction to kind of African studies, empirical African studies in our section, in our department. Africa is not in Spain, in the social sciences, let's say, is not a very, very common topic to research, except maybe from a political science approach. But from a sociological and specifically a transversal or multidisciplinary approach is something which is relatively new and innovative at least in our curriculum. So I feel very, very honored. I'm very happy to have been invited to participate in this project Una Europa Respira, which is a broader network of universities, both African and European, based in Belgium and in Nairobi, and which deals with respiratory health in urban environments in Africa. And our project, Una Europa Respira, it's a seed project which was started a few months ago with Peter van der Broek from Leuven University and Margaret Kidogo from University of Nairobi, and many other colleagues from Leiden, from the African Studies Center, from the University of Kinshasa in Congo, and me, myself. This is a seed project, so it's a very short project for a year. We are meeting, we are generating a network, and so far this is going very, very well. Because we have a meeting, a seminar, very fruitful seminar in Nairobi some months ago, and we learn a lot. At least I learned a lot about waste management, governance, and waste management as a very transversal topic to understand cities, societies, and of course, environmental damage. So we're going to have a session with a number of participation from different perspectives. Engineering, architecture, sociology, anthropology. Even someone is coming from civil society, from waste management and plastic regulation from an international point of view. I'm going to introduce them gradually, and we're going to have 20-25 minutes presentations, and then we have a little period for questions and answers and debate, and then we have a break, and then another block. And that will be it. So I'm going to give the floor to Victor Alonso Rocafort, our Vice Dean of Economic Affairs and are probably the most visible head and environmental issues here in this school.
Thank you, Andres. Well, I have a little presentation. Andres asked me to present something about the theme of this symposium, and well, I will start reading it. Now, comrades, now is the time to decide to change sides. For centuries, Europe has brought the progress of other men to a halt and enslaved them for its own purposes and glory. For centuries, it has stifled virtually the whole of humanity in the name of a so-called spiritual adventure. Look at it now, teetering between atomic destruction and spiritual disintegration. Europe has taken over leadership of the world with fervor, cynicism, and violence. And look at how the shadow of its monuments spreads and multiplies. Europe has denied itself not only humility and modesty, but also solicitude and tenderness. This Europe, which never stopped talking of man, which never stopped proclaiming its sole concern was man, we know now the price of suffering humanity has paid for every one of its spiritual victories. Come, comrades, the European game is finally over. We must look for something else. Europe has gained such a mad and reckless momentum that it has lost control and reason and is heading at dizzying speed towards the brink from which we would be advised to remove ourselves as quickly as possible. It is all too true, however, that we need a model, schemas, and examples. For many of us, the European model is the most elating. But we have seen how misleading such an imitation can be. When I look for man in European lifestyles and technology, I see a constant denial of man, an avalanche of murders. Let us decide not to imitate Europe. 2 centuries ago, a former colony took it into its head to catch up with Europe. It has been so successful that the United States of America has become a monster where the flaws, sickness, and inhumanity of Europe have reached frightening proportions. Comrades, have we nothing else to do but create a third Europe? We must take account of not only the occasional prodigious thesis maintained by Europe, but also its crimes. If we want to transform Africa into a new Europe, America into a new Europe, then let us entrust the destinies of our countries to the Europeans. They will do a better job than the best of us. But if we want humanity to take one step forward, if we want to take it to another level than the one where Europe has placed it, then we must innovate. We must be pioneers. For Europe, for ourselves, and for humanity, comrades, we must make a new start, develop a new way of thinking. These are selected excerpts from the conclusions with which Frank Fanon closes The Wretched of the Earth. The book he saw published just a few days before he died in 1963. Today, we face the realization of those warnings about the course of Europe and the United States. In 1968, Gordon MacDonald, a geophysicist and advisor to the Johnson administration, had written an article called How to Wreck the Environment, in which he predicted that beyond nuclear weapons, the weapon of mass destruction will be the environmental catastrophe that awaited us. The current polycrises include climatic and biodiversity issues, challenges related to new materials, and alterations in various cycles within Gaia. Additionally, it involves democratic concerns and questions of values. We are witnessing the rise of new forms of fascism and authoritarianism in countries such as Hungary, Italy, Russia, or Argentina. This trend is also evident within the White House in the United States. Europe is facing a historic moment requiring it to independently determine its political, economic, and cultural identity. In this context, today, we present here a collaboration between European and African universities, the University of Nairobi, the University of Leuven, and us, the Complutense University of Madrid. We will hear several presentations on urban waste management and respiratory health in Africa. If we learn anything from the new ways of dealing with the ecosocial crisis, it is that international interrelationships matter. And if Europe wants to confront the latest authoritarian tendencies of the American system, which has emerged from its own foundations, as Fanon described, it cannot simply return to a supposedly enlightened and liberal essence. The shadow of our monuments is too long and too bloody for such a movement to enjoy credibility in the global south and in Europe itself. We must redefine our economic frameworks, setting aside our obsession with growth in favor of pursuing genuine prosperity. The limitations of the nation state and the illusion of its sovereignty are unhelpful, especially in light of the daily injustices perpetuated by European migrations policies. It is time to move beyond the zero-sum games identified by Wallerstein, beyond the neocolonialism that upholds a position of strength in areas like the international division of labor and the terms of international trade. If this crisis is truly going to reshape the international landscape and its alliances, akin to the changes that occurred in 1945, we will need to rethink the framework that emerged from Bretton Woods and act generously for our collective salvation as Europeans and Africans, but also as human beings. New political, economic, and international frameworks must be complemented by advancements in sustainability science. I will conclude with some selected quotes, this time from my most recent article, Nothing to See to Fanon, where I argue that the question of the sky's color, which also affects respiratory health, is a vital issue for political science today. In 2019, the United Nations General Assembly adopted by consensus a resolution designating September 7 as the International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies. The naming of this International Day reflects a narrative that seeks mainly to establish a link between eliminating polluted air and the possibility of seeing the blue sky. UN resolution highlights that air pollution is the single greatest environmental risk to human health. It emphasizes the need to strengthen international cooperation and to raise public awareness at all levels. But also, the UN resolution acknowledges the negative impact of air pollution to ecosystems. This last relational statement requires a framework that has not yet been fully explored in the United Nations campaigns. The alternative perspective offered here, a story that tells the long history of the blue skies, the richness of its relations in Gaia, and its co-vulnerability with human beings, envisions a new kind of Custodian community, the protectors of the sky community, facing super weak problems in the nature-culture continuum. Well, the article concluded by proposing a clean air for blue skies sustainable development goal from a broader post-anthropocentric perspective that advocates for positive and reciprocal action with more than human entities, as the sky itself. Based on what Andrés has shared with me about this project, I believe it aligns well with the new frameworks we need to develop today through collaborations between European and African universities. These partnerships could lay the groundworks for addressing the polycrisis of our time during this critical historical moment. As the Vice Dean of this faculty, I welcome you. I hope you feel at home in our center. Thank you very much. And that's all. Thank you.
Well, finally, I just gonna remark some things that they have already said. For the Complutense University, it's very important to be part of this type of alliances. Una Europa is an alliance of several universities in Europe, which is also trying to create new alliances with universities all over the world. Not only Latin America universities, which is going to be part of the relationships and partnerships, but also with African universities. We've got one specific department, which is the School for African Studies, which is working, trying to create partnerships and alliances with universities and governments, because working in Africa is very difficult, but we are trying to improve the relationships with NGOs and universities. Also, this faculty, I think, has been very relevant, trying to create a space and a group of researchers which are also working with African topics and development. And I think that this is an opportunity to keep working on that. For me, this symposium, International Symposium, as Valisa says, I think it's an opportunity to keep working and searching and learning from different perspectives. And I think it's relevant not only because it's about Africa, but also because it's a kind of attempt to join theoretical research with empirical research, trying to understand how we can think, reflect, and also act to transform the cities in the world, but mostly in this case in Africa. And also for me, it's also important not only because it's about Africa or because it's part of the Una Europa Alliance, but I think it's because it's in the key topic we are working on since COVID time. I think COVID was an amazing opportunity to look at the One Health perspective. We need to look at One Health. We need to look at One Health means not only human health and animal health, but also One Health means the health of everyone in every place of the world. So must be the perspective, because maybe we can work in European, we can work in our cities, we can transform our cities, but if we are not looking in a global perspective, we are not going to attempt or to try to solve a global problem, which is that can be so complicated and complex as we saw at COVID time. So for me, it's a pleasure to having here Margaret and Peter. Margaret, thank you very much for coming. And Peter, which is an old friend. And I think that for us, having you here is part of the attempt to reinforce this kind of alliances and looking forward to the future in order to make more alliances and more research. Thank you very much, Andres, for coordinating this symposium and all the technical staff that has done this, which is not really easy. So thank you very much for everybody, and I hope you enjoyed the seminar and all the conferences this morning and the rest of the days that you're going to stay here. Thank you very much and enjoy the seminar.
Thank you very much. Okay, thanks very much to Rosa and Victor for your very interesting intervention, framing also the context of these topics we are going to look at, not only just from a sociological, technical point of view, but definitely also from a political point of view in, as you well said, very, very challenging times in which we hear every day things that are unthinkable just the day before. And always I think, how would this impact, these changes, these sudden and unforeseen and forecasted changes, how would they impact this very, very fragile equilibrium that we're trying to build around fighting climate change and about making environment something more just and more fair. So this is a very good forum for that, to think about that, about environmental justice, about social justice, and also about having some hope, developing new tools to struggle against what is coming on, which is something we thought we have beaten in the past, but is now coming again very strongly. So this is a place also to start thinking about that. I'm going to give the floor to Margaret Makariak-Dogo, which is a lecturer at the University of Nairobi in the Department of Architecture. And she's another designer and researcher in engineering science and a master in human settlements, and she's got a bachelor degree in architecture. She's the shareholder of the Union Europa Africa funding grant for their respiratory health, which I mentioned before, outdoor pollution and waste management. And she's this group is developing a built environment perspective to the whole network of Respira Africa. So she also has professional experience in architectural practice and management, and from private and NGO sectors. And she teaches on sustainable development and the role of community-based organizations in urban and regional development. So, Margaret, the floor is yours. I'm going to... Maybe you want to sit here so you can...
Okay.
You can tell. I forgot to introduce Julian Panadero, which is our young career researcher, early career researcher. He's young too, and he's about to receive his dissertation on Friday. And he's part of the team, and it's the Complutense team. It's Julian and me, and I'm very grateful. He's a very nice traveling colleague and partner, and now he's going to take care of the technology, which is something which is very important for me because I'm not ready for that. So
thank you for your introduction. We are having some technical issues.
Oh yeah, do we?
Presentation.
Oh,
They're gonna fix it.
maybe should we go, or
Yeah.
Peter?
We have technical issues.
I don't know.
No, yes, but only with Margaret. So if you can,
Okay.
if you want to start.
I know you want. What's going on? It's not opening. Okay, you need to plug this in.
Yeah.
You want to start?
Do you mind if Peter starts?
If the chair tells me to start.
Yeah, me, the chair. So since sorry for this technical format problem. So I'm going to give to introduce Peter, which is the other coordinator of the project. Peter comes from the University of Leuven in Flanders, in Belgium. He's a professor of spatial planning and sustainable development at the Department of Architecture, and he heads the Planning and Development Research Group. We were talking a couple of hours ago about his trajectory, which is very fascinating. He's trained as an architect and as an urban planner, and he has done his research on sociology. Oh, there we go. So he's having a very eclectic, as Margaret, profile, which I think is very interesting for all of us. So mixing different disciplines like architecture, sociology, planning, etc. We have our presentation ready, do we? So we're starting with Margaret, following the right order, and then we will follow with you. Okay, Peter? Yeah. You ready? Yeah.
Mine is still opening.
Oh, this is Peter's.
Yes.
Okay, so we go with Peter. Sorry, I thought it was Margaret. Peter. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Andres. So I work on at the crossroads of spatial planning, social innovation, and territorial development. My work is not really on waste management or respiratory health. I came into this topic, or I'm meeting this topic through this project, this Respira project. I had some experience a long time ago with, actually my father was involved in a project of waste management and planning in the region of the city of Antwerp in Flanders. But that was, well, so we heard at the table, dinner table in the evenings when he came back from meetings. Then I had some experience in the city of Montreal during a research stay. But actually the topic is quite new. Well, I am working together with people, with the people of my research group on environmental issues, including disaster risk reduction in Indonesia, sacred forests in Kenya, coastal displacement of communities in coastal areas in Kenya. We had a project on eco-territorial governance, so private protected areas in Peru. And maybe a few others. But I chose to present today a case study which is very near to where I live. It's in my home city of Antwerp, its agglomeration, and how we approach that. Because it shows a bit how I look at the experiences that we're developing in this project with the Respira team. So the title of my presentation is Connecting the Social and Ecological Through Action Research, a Case of Urban Nature. Yep, next slide. I was invited a couple of years ago to present or to be part of a panel on biodiversity. Now, my training is in architectural engineering and then in spatial planning and then through my PhD in the social sciences. So I'm not a biologist, an ecologist, or a straightforward environmental scientist. So I wondered, what can I contribute? How can I contribute to this panel? And the panel was about biodiversity, how to increase biodiversity, and especially on university grounds. So I started wondering. Yes, next slide, please. Julian, could you? Yeah. Oops, that's small. So I started asking myself, or asking the other panelists, why is biodiversity such an issue, and why is biodiversity increasing and not decreasing, notwithstanding all the efforts to increase it? So I asked the panel questions about the drivers of the decrease in biodiversity, and I made a claim for looking at the more socio-political backgrounds, the socio-environmental backgrounds, the cultural backgrounds, histories of extractivism, driving the decrease in biodiversity, the role of theory building in that, economistic theories that underplay the role of social, political, cultural aspects and that only focus on supply and demand theories. I have to check a bit. And then I pointed out the consequences of that for spatial planning. So the results of the lack or the results of all these drivers pushing for lower biodiversity for city making and how cities become all the more dense and at the same time expand and pushing out nature into agricultural lands that become more and more intensive, which results or which creates conflicts between rural and the urban environments, which then creates conflicts between agriculture and nature. So all these drivers were not really understood or looked at by ecologists, biologists, and so on. I also pointed out the importance of the model or the understanding of nature-culture interactions, where the separation between the two is the predominant model. And the challenge is to think both at the same time and how they affect each other and getting rid of that divide. Yes, please. So then I argued for a socio-ecological approach in which the biologists, the ecologists, and then the social scientists and the planners and territorial development specialists could come together. And that approach, yes, starts with the question on biodiversity for whom. So whatever people say is better, it could be biodiversity, could be a statement by an ecologist, is never better for everybody. So that's the quote I take here. Better, I say in, what is it, in my glasses. In a small voice, how can I think this is better? Better never means better for everyone, he says. It always means worse for some. Yes, next slide. So I took some inspirations in various theories that try to combine environmental aspects and social aspects. And I list a few here in the left column, including eco-modernism, environmental injustice, cultural or political ecology, cultural political ecology, deep ecology, then complex adaptive systems and socio-institutional approaches. And each of those has disadvantages or has issues. So the eco-modernism is quite strong in looking at environmental issues, but lacks or does not look into power, aspects of power, into injustice aspects, inclusion versus exclusion. The environmental injustice specifically looks at these things, but then underplays the backgrounds and the drivers, the more fundamental drivers of aspects of injustice and exclusion. Political ecology then does look at these fundamental drivers, but tends to overstress them and forget a bit about the specificity of situations, making grand claims that are always applicable, but it lacks a bit of field work. The deep ecology approach then brings in the ecological aspects more deeply, but then misses out the social aspects. Complex adaptive systems is something that the environmental engineers in neighboring faculties are very strong, looking at self-organization of cities, for example, and then at the expense of increased disorder outside of cities. So it's a very strong model, but it doesn't pay attention to the injustice issues and to exclusion of minorities. And then the final group of theories that I'm quite fond of, that I consider myself in, are social institutional approaches. But in interactions with ecologists, I have found that it still lacks ecological concepts. So I was always thinking that, okay, I'm quite strong of bringing in these ecological thoughts, but in a conversation with ecologists, my knowledge seems very primitive. Next, please. So we try to build a small model that can then be elaborated further, that tries to connect the actors and the institutions in both the environmental field and the social field. So looking at nature as an actant, as something that has an impact, that has agency, just like humans. So it's the human and the non-human agency. And then on the other hand is the human and the non-human structural drivers, the dynamics, the mechanisms. Combining these is a bit the challenge. Yes, please. So that leads to a number of statements as an approach, or that form the foundation for an approach to combine the social and the natural, the social and the environmental. So I pick a few of these statements here, and the most important one is that nature is social and social is nature, is natural. So nature and the social are both part and parcel of the same socio-ecological dynamics, which then leads to how we can conceptualize this a bit further. The whole approach is a more than human approach, so it tries to, what I gave in the previous slide, to look at nature and culture both from the agency and the structure side, giving agency to nature, giving agency to the human, and the same for the structural drivers. Nature is seen as, or let's first start with the humans. So humans are nature is another starting point. We have our bodies, our physical, biophysical processes. Cities, is claimed by political ecologists, are just as natural as forests. But at the same time, nature comes to us through social processes. So nature is always socially mediated and socially constructed. And then the rest. So, okay, that leads us to environmental justice. So with these starting points, we can always bring in or question whose nature are we talking about? In the case of the seminar, whose biodiversity are we talking about? And where are the power relations and power structures embedded in this interaction? So justice and injustice issues come to the fore. In discussions about conservation of nature, that leads to statements that there is no such thing as pristine nature, and that aspects of rewilding, for example, also have to be seen as both ecological and social initiatives and endeavors. The whole thing is process-oriented, and then there are governance aspects that come in. But I will continue with the next slide. So I bring in a short case study to try to apply this approach, and it's a case study called The Berm. It's an old railway embankment in a place called Mortsel, which is in the agglomeration of the city of Antwerp. Yes, please. So it's a place, it's an old railway embankment. It's the green area that you can see, the stretch of about 3 kilometers long in the middle of a rather dense agglomeration. You see on the lower right corner, you see an old fortress from 1870. And this railroad was an old road connecting these fortresses. So it's a belt of fortresses of 10 and even more, about 20 of these fortresses around the city of Antwerp. Yes, please. In the 1970s, the railroad was abandoned and the place developed into what you see here, like a kind of a natural refuge in the middle of residential areas. Yes. But the place is also in plans at the higher scale. So what you see here is the blue line is a plan that's going to be implemented and is being implemented for making a second ring around the city of Antwerp. And the orange line, is an extension of that. So what looks as a nature refuge where people walk their dogs and where youth just hangs out, is also a plan to put a big infrastructure there. Yes, please. Now that plan has been there since the 1970s, and sometimes it pops up and then it disappears again. In 2010s, it came back. Local residents then started protesting. and succeeded somehow in affecting the plan, though it's not sure the impact of their protest. Could also be that political negotiations at higher level just led to the temporary disappearance of the plan again. Well, but the plan was stopped. Yes, next slide. In the next generation of protests, a local activist group started claiming the space. And they said, we need to be present in this space because these plans, they keep on showing up, and we need to appropriate the space in a positive way. So not as a protest, but as a positive kind of movement. The person on the lower left is the initiator. Yeah, no, you can, that's fine, yeah. And we got in touch with them through a PhD research and were invited to participate in one of their events, or maybe the other way around. They had organized a number of events in the place, and by talking to him, we came to a kind of a proposal to take part in the next event, the yearly event that they were organizing. Actually, they were about to stop it, but then we came in, explained a bit what we were interested in, and he decided, or the group decided to do the event again. So we got involved in a kind of small-scale action research. We became part of an event that they yearly organized. We organized small debates. So we were there in the place, we camped in the place for a week, more or less, a bit, 10 days. We got involved in small debates that we organized in the evenings while we were there. We rented bikes, did field work, talked to people, involved children from a nearby school, worked with these children, and then, next slide, got involved in the opening event. So the picture on the lower left is the opening event, which was set up as a debate with residents and local politicians and the governor of the province of Antwerp that was invited. We designed nature walks together with the nature conservation group, local nature conservation group, and invited entrepreneurs from the area that didn't know the place to enter a network lunch and to discuss the future of the place. The table that you see on the lower right was covered with plastic so that notes could be taken, and that the whole place, the small event and debate became a nice discussion. Yes, please. In the final event, so the last day of our stay there was also the final event of the activist group, which kind of a party inviting all people to join the walks that we organized, and going past the small interventions that we did with students. On the lower left is a simulation. So that's drawing. The upper left is the program, or is a poster that students made and that showed the places where things were to be seen. And then on the right, the picture that you didn't show. Yeah, the middle upper is the design of a small exposition called Not a Botanical Garden. So students designed 150 signs that were put in the area, which gave explanations about the plants, the species, and some jokes were also added there. We did urban yoga, the lower right picture, on a very busy crossroads. This was practicing for it. And making a small role play, inviting residents to take part in the role play in yoga in a very unhealthy place on polluted soil, a traffic crossing with a lot of traffic and noise and air pollution. And then we painted the middle lower picture is we painted the streets in the evening to simulate a bit of a connection between the parts of the place. Yes. This is the program, and we became the program with the groups of students. Yes, next one. Part of the whole event was also research. Students were involved in the months before with the PhD researcher to build an analysis of the place, an socio-ecological analysis, let's say, which starts like this, with putting things on the wall, trying to identify the actors involved and the mechanisms they're involved in. And then that evolved in the next slide into a full developed timeline, in which different fields of action and moments, turning points, and key issues were defined. And the role of this is mainly to develop an alternative narrative about the place, which then can replace the existing narratives. Well, and the change that we did is moving from a narrative about an abandoned place to a kind of a place of resistance against ongoing urbanization, which has been going on for like 100 years or so. Yes, please. In the next stage, how am I doing with time? It feels that I should finish. Okay, I'm doing fine. Okay. This, okay. So after that, we left the place, the PhD finished the research, but then we were invited to enter another follow-up, a small follow-up. The Agency of Nature and Forest of the Flemish government did a research on urban nature, because it was one of their topics. And we proposed the same case to look at that. So we did a small follow-up of the action research with the students, again connecting to the local activists, and looking at the place as an urban nature. Yes, please. There we defined 3 fields of action. So building on, yeah, thank you, Julian. Building on this socio-ecological approach, we said what happens in this place are 3 important things. First, community is being built. What these activists have been doing, also continuing previous efforts, is building community. And then we try to look a bit in depth what is happening, what is ongoing here, and what are the factors that are important for building community, and how does urban nature play a role. So again, we brought in the examples of what happened on the berm. Doing the urban yoga, doing the event, but also building towards the event, inviting neighbors or neighboring residents to the place, connecting to local schools, etc., all contributed to building, but also maintaining a community that cherished and appropriated the space. In the next track, we thought that building governance is also what is going on there, and there are issues, or the activists could pay more attention to that. So they missed a few opportunities to connect to local authorities and then to provincial authorities and then some intermediaries as well. But to build this place, appropriate it and maintain it and continuously reproduce it as a social, environmental issue, challenge, you need to build governance, you need to organize, you need to reach out to local authorities, make connections between activists and authorities, try to trigger local authorities to support the activists and not take over, which is usually what governments do, and then link to other scales of governance. So that's a second track. And then a third one is building a socio-ecological narrative. The interaction between the building community and building governance is building a narrative. What I said, we try to change that using an analysis. In this case, we were collaborating with ecologists, and the ecologists brought to the fore their concepts and their understanding of how nature is built in such a place. But they left out the social. So the one on the left is a list of criteria that ecologists bring in, structure of nature, etc. But then we brought in a few, these are in Dutch, some recent literature, as ignorant about ecology, how it exactly works, but there's some literature in fashion, right, about the role of fungi in connecting, in making living soils and in connecting species, in connecting tree species with everything that is happening under the ground. Also literature about evolution in cities. So it's a bit of literature that I feel connects the social and the natural. So based on that, next one, we try to bring in another socio-ecological narrative, building on 5 principles. Very briefly, saying that soils live and connect. That's something that social scientists don't really think about. Then species can also collaborate. That's something that ecologists don't really think about. They think in competition, while this literature says there is more symbiosis than we think. So we can, this literature about the fungi and how they connect species shows that also species can collaborate, and it's not about only about competition. So there's a social science aspect coming in. And then humans are and make nature. We forget about that. Also social scientists forget about that, and the ecologists forget about that. The ecologists see humans as a stress factor, usually, but actually humans, what they do is make nature. And then humans, human and non-human nature in the city, they evolve, building on that books about. And it's a specific type of evolution. And then lastly, what the ecologists don't really take into account, human and non-human relations have politics. If you talk with ecologists, they will never think or when they favor certain species, they don't really have an explanation for that. This is where political scientists, for example, can come in and question, why do you favor this species and not another? It's actually a political choice you're making here, or an social, ecological choice. Yeah, next. This is very quick, just scrolling. Yeah, so looking, one of the things we tried to do was looking for appropriate forms of analysis to bring together these social and ecological aspects. Yeah, next one. Just showing a few pictures. So we looked at the segments of this place. Yes, next one. Then looked at sections. We couldn't do full analysis of the whole place looking at biodiversity. We're not trained to do that, and it takes too much time. So we looked at sections, transects, and then we drilled as amateurs. We did some soil sampling, looked at the species in these transects of 10 meters wide. So defined all the trees there, measured them, made pictures, so that enabled discussion with the ecologists. Yes, next one. Tree species here, well, all the different colors. Next one. And then this is, for me, quite interesting, is building a timeline for both the human and non-human. This is a timeline for the human, trying to understand how governance evolved. So how this place was part of all kinds of political, let's say, frameworks, governance frameworks. So this is the human side, and the next timeline is a timeline for the ecological side, where we looked at, where the student looked at the succession of nature and how it emerged in the last 50 years. Yes. Yeah, to conclude, there is what has all of this to do with this Respira project. It's the approach of looking at things. So next one, it leads to questions. The question about who? So whose biodiversity or whose waste? What are the drivers? How is waste produced? And the same for air pollution. What are the power relations and power structures involved, and so on. Next one. These are a few pictures from one of the the dump sites we visited in Nairobi. I'm sure Margaret will also show a few of those, but showing how it's full of social dynamics. So it's an environmental issue, but it's full of what humans do in any other place. They organize, they build community, they build governance, and it's full of connections between the social and the ecological. On the left is waste picking. The upper right is a church built on the dump site. On the lower left is a place where there were precious metals were found. So it has a specific meaning in the whole place. And on the lower right is a group of women specifically responsible for paper picking. Yes. On the same site, you find nature. It is geography. It has topography, and therefore there is water running down somewhere in small creeks. There is nature, emerging plants, and there you see the graffiti combined with nature. So the whole place is very socio-ecological. I couldn't take the picture of the worms, but the upper right, it was actually the worm that I would try to make a picture of. So the worms are active in that soil. Yes. And then as a last slide, I was thinking that Andres was going to present this, but this was my reaction as a socio-ecological researcher trying to map out the mechanisms. You cannot see it, but it's like trying to make a mind map of what is going on this place, from waste picking to building community, making links with the recycling business, the state coming in, on different levels and so on. And then I saw that Andres was making a parallel picture, which was more elaborate and clean. So yeah. So for me, this was the link with the story that I've been bringing. Thanks for your attention.
Margaret, are you ready now? Sure. Sure. Well, but there's no way of opening it. ¿Las has puesto en PowerPoint? ¿Las intenta poner en PDF?
So good morning, everyone. As we wait for the technology, I can as well at least begin, and I'd like to express my gratitude for the invitation to be here. It's my very first time in Spain, and I'm enjoying it, really. And I am just looking forward to coming in the sun, in the summer rather. But it's been a pleasure since I arrived yesterday, and I'm really grateful for Professor Andres' invitation that we could come together with Professor Peter, whom we are partnering in this project. And I think it's really a great start in terms of collaborating together. I'd like to appreciate Vice Rector and the Vice Dean for the kind words and the introduction. And just to begin, maybe I would also like to express gratitude to the UNA Europa team, because it is through their funding that we are, all of us, able to be here today to share with you the knowledge that we've been able to gather during this short period of the project that we've been having. And more or less, the collaboration that has begun as a result of this project. So I would like to just say thank you to UNA Europa as well. Maybe just a little bit in terms of the history of this project is that the UNA Europa partnership is collaborating with 8 universities in Africa, one in Mozambique, and 2 others in South Africa, one in West Africa and Central Africa, that's the University of Kinshasa, and in East Africa, there's 2 universities in Uganda, and ourselves, the University of Nairobi. So with regards then to what it's the vision, the shared vision of the UNA Europa, is that so in terms of the vision, it's a common vision that is shared between the collaborating universities, and the vision is towards building a vibrant and diverse international community of researchers across Europe and Africa. And the main purpose of the funding is to provide support for growth and development of early career researchers within the focus of addressing global challenges. So within this project, the main challenge that we are seeking to address has to do with air pollution and proper waste management. And in regards to how we found ourselves or how we have come to this moment, a year ago, we responded to the UNA Europa call, and we collaborated to write this project. The partnering universities being KU Leuven, University of Nairobi, Leiden University in the Netherlands, Complutense University of Madrid, and University of Kinshasa. And so we submitted the application in February, and we're very grateful that in June we received the funding. And through this funding, we've managed to have the 1-week workshop that you see the picture that we've taken while we were in Nairobi, and the visits to the field where we managed to visit the dump site in Nairobi and in Nakuru City. With regards then to the discussion or what I will be sharing this morning, it's more or less to give you an overview of what the main challenge of this project is really about, and to also discuss with regards to the context of the specific Nairobi case. So I will be focusing mostly on Nairobi. And then moving on then just to an overview, a brief overview about what this project Respira is about. Like you've heard, it's focusing on respiratory health, outdoor air pollution, and solid waste management, particularly from the perspective of the built environment. So in this project, we are mainly assessing the impact of mismanaged solid waste. This is particularly the practice of burning waste, and how this has an impact on air pollution, and as a result on chronic respiratory diseases. And the focus is primarily on 2 case studies, that in Nakuru and the dump site in Nairobi, which is called Dandora. So this project that we are working on deals, or more or less aims to reduce air quality inequity and improve on chronic respiratory disease care through involving communities in devising waste management strategies for more sustainable urban planning. And so, like I already highlighted, the seed funding was used to organize a workshop, and now we are organizing this symposium. And the purpose is for us to be able to share knowledge, as well as in the process, hopefully develop some joint funding applications. And this project really activates existing partnerships with local stakeholders. And the purpose of this is to enhance our understanding about the role of improper waste disposal practices, such as waste burning, in the management of chronic respiratory diseases. And by doing this, we hope to inform policy as well as leverage lasting partnerships for future action research. And then in terms of this symposium, this symposium is really to help us understand the importance of transdisciplinary approaches when it comes to carrying out action research. And therefore, the focus of this research is really mostly towards contributing to One Health, and given that its focus is on respiratory health. Additionally, it's also contributing towards sustainability as a subject area through the various recommendations that we put forward with regards to solid waste management. And also, given that we are looking at case studies that are in need of these approaches. In terms of the academic areas that we are contributing to through this project, it's mostly in the area of architecture in a very broad sense, where we're looking at the urban development, urban issues, primarily in terms of how the spatial focus is given in the built environment. But it also touches on the social sciences as an academic field. And this is because we are paying attention to the social processes, such as the society's socio-structural dynamics, also the cultural aspects, as well as the economic issues, such as livelihoods that take place in these dump sites, and also the political dynamics, because we're looking at the unequal relations of power and how these play out in the improper management of waste in the case study areas. Just to mention very briefly about the genesis or the origin of this project in terms of the network. It's built on an existing network, which is called the Respira network. And it's a network that is domiciled within KU Leuven. And it more or less is a community of academic and non-academic stakeholders who are committed to mitigating air pollution and working towards healthier futures, particularly that of addressing the issues that have to do with chronic respiratory disease in Africa. So 2 years ago, this was in April of 2023, the network hosted an open faculty conference in Nakuru, and that was titled Transdisciplinary Action Research to Prevent, Combat, and Research Chronic Respiratory Disease on the African continent. And it was during this conference that we were able to present a paper together with a colleague in this project called Dr. Plunche, and it was out of this session that we discussed from a built environment perspective that we developed the proposal that brought us here today. So when we look at the issue of reducing air quality inequity and respiratory disease, which is the focus of the discussion this morning, then we'll take a look at some of the issues that are happening within the case of Nairobi, Kenya. And to begin, I provide just a few definitions so that we at least share the same perspective when we are discussing the terms. First of all, I explained that from the built environment perspective, which is quite a broad term, in this discussion, we are looking at mostly the management of waste in terms of the infrastructure that is required to manage it. So by waste management infrastructure, I'm referring to the systems and the facilities that are used to handle the collection, transportation, processing, recycling, and most of all, which is the focus of today, the disposal of waste. With regards to then municipal solid waste, we are looking at waste that's been generated by households and wastes of similar nature that are generated either in commercial premises or industrial premises, or even schools, hospitals, prisons, including public space such as streets, markets, public toilets, bus stops, and parks. So it's really just a provisional definition to help us understand what kind of waste we are referring to here, because if we're looking then at other types of waste like industrial waste or hazardous waste, this is very special kind of, requires very special kind of management and is separate from the municipal solid waste. And so this definition also clarifies who is responsible for this waste management, in that it's the municipality. And therefore, it's not to say they are the only ones responsible, but in this particular aspect, we're looking at them being the primary responsibility or the primary authorities. At the global scale, when we're discussing about waste, we realize that there's been rapid urbanization and population growth that has contributed to the increasing generation of waste globally. And therefore, you find that the world is generating an estimated 2.3 billion tons of municipal solid waste every year, and this is expected to increase up to 3.5 billion tons by 2050. And there are about 2 billion people who do not have access to regular waste collection service, about 3 billion who rely on open dump sites, and there's inadequate waste management, which leads, of course, then to environmental pollution, health risks, and loss of resources. When we talk about waste as waste disposal as being loss of resources, we are looking at it from the perspective of what in Kiswahili we say taka ni mali. Yeah? This is the perspective that considers waste as a resource. And so this is something that needs to be also looked into. When it comes to then dealing with waste in the dump sites, you find that first of all, its decomposition provides challenges in that it provides plenty of heat. And this heat is what leads to the spontaneous combustion and landfill fires that release toxic fumes. And as a result of these toxic fumes, for example, methane gas, which is produced, it contributes to climate change. In addition to this, the inhalation of these toxic fumes is what leads to then respiratory problems as a result of that. And this then has an impact on the neighboring communities that are located within the close proximity of these dump sites. With regards then to the global air pollution and respiratory disease, you find that at the global scale, air pollution is really the biggest environmental risk to health and carries the responsibility of about 1 in every 8 deaths annually. And this is worldwide. With regards then to what this means, when we look at air pollution in recent studies that were done, in 2021, air pollution accounted for 8.1 million deaths, And out of this, chronic respiratory diseases were accounting for the majority of the disease burden from air pollution. So this is a significant global issue. And with regards to what is it about the air that is harmful to health, it's the fine particulate matter. So most of the deaths that result out of air pollution are caused by human exposure to fine inhalable particles or fine particulate matter, also known as PM2.5. This refers to the airborne particles that measure less than 2.5 micrometers in diameter. That's less than a 30th of the diameter of a human hair. And these fine particles, as well as precursor chemicals, contribute to the fine particle formations in the air, and they're emitted from vehicles, residential fuel use, waste burning, coal burning, power plants, agricultural and industrial activities, as well as wildfires, and many other human and natural sources. Air pollution in terms of its waste management is really a problem because of the methane gas emissions and the waste burning. And this comes from various sectors. So it's not only waste sector that contributes, although it does have a share in it. In terms of the sectors that contribute to it, there's the agricultural sector, there's also the energy sector, and the sanitation and the waste sector. So there are various sectors that do contribute, and the waste sector contributes 20%, and this is inclusive of the landfills and the wastewater treatment. So the result of this is when waste is burned, it significantly supplies dangerous carcinogens like dioxins and furans and black carbon. And these are short-lived climate pollutants that contribute to climate change, and they increase melting in polar regions due to the deposition of soot and black carbon on snow and ice. So there are several issues that come up as a result of this. With regards then to the waste burning, this is a practice that needs to be prevented, actually. And you find that most communities that end up burning waste is more or less because they are making efforts to free up space in the dump sites or to facilitate waste picking of non-combustible materials such as metals, which can be recycled or resold, primarily for profit or for use as a heat source. And in these dump sites, there's also then the danger of spontaneous combustion as a result of the combination of factors, and then that contributes to the methane gas production. And so there is a very serious need to address this open burning, which is mostly practiced as a result of either a lack of awareness or a lack of understanding about the risks of open burning. So there's a call for interventions at the global scale, but also at the regional scale. So if we look at the region of sub-Saharan Africa, we find that the challenge of waste is quite a huge one, in that Africa generates 174 million tons of municipal solid waste. This was back in 2016. And it's actually has been expected to increase to a point of 244 million tons by this year. So it's growing in terms of the burden of, or the challenge of managing waste. With regards then to what the World Bank considers in terms of the region of Africa's burden of how to manage its waste, over 90% of the waste is dumped in uncontrolled landfills. And often this is accompanied by open burning. And as a result of this, you find that there is a variety of compositions, what goes into the waste. For instance, in Kenya, there's an estimated 40% of the air pollution concentrations which are contributed to by road transport, and further causes of air pollution come from waste mismanagement and use of biofuels, what you see in the light green section there. Then looking at the dump site in Dandora. So this is the official dump site. That's the one image of it in Nairobi, and the destination of about 2,000 tons of solid waste, which is generated daily by nearly 4.5 million residents of the city. The 30-acre site, which is one of the largest in Africa, was once a stone quarry that the city council sought to use temporarily. It was opened in 1975 through World Bank funding and was deemed full in 2001. Yet, 23 years later, it's still in operation. Since its establishment, an estimated 20 to 30 million tons of waste have been deposited on this site. And the activities in this site are very loosely controlled. So this enables indiscriminate burning of waste and various waste picking initiatives. The main reason for waste burning as a method of disposal in Nairobi is largely out of convenience because there is an absence of a functioning system of waste management by the council, and also there's a lack of adequate enforcement of the legal guidelines on the disposal of solid waste by the government. So studies have shown that the area around Dandora dump site is highly contaminated with persistent organic pollutants, and some of these have been carried out through studies that revealed there is these high levels of pollution. So in terms of the presence of the dump site in a very residential area, it poses a very huge public health risk and environmental justice concerns. In most cities, low-income settlements play host to most waste dumping sites, while affluent communities enjoy some of the best waste management, as well as water and sanitation facilities. And this is despite the fact that affluent people mostly contribute towards generating more waste. In the case of Dandora, you find that it's located right next to the informal settlement, which is in gray, right next to the area highlighted in blue, the blue being the dump site. And you find that next to the dump site itself, then there are other residential areas as well. And so what you find is that there are young people in the informal settlement in the top picture who have taken it upon themselves to raise awareness about the toxicity levels within the area as a result of the presence of the dump site. Other groups that are affected by its presence are the waste pickers, especially, who are vulnerable groups within, because they engage in carrying out their livelihoods within this area. And so it is it poses very huge health risks to the waste picking community. And then to look then at just the solid waste management legal framework in Nairobi County, you find that it's not that there's a lack of guidelines or regulations, it's really the enforcement that is the issue. Because if we look at the 2010 Constitution of Kenya, it provides that every person has a right to a clean and healthy environment. This includes the right to for the environment to be protected for the benefit of the present and future generations through legislation or other measures. There is also the 2015 Nairobi County Solid Waste Management Act that provides every person in the county who is entitled to a clean and healthy environment. There's also the 2022 Sustainable Waste Management Act, which establishes the legal and institutional framework for sustainable waste management. And then there is the jurisdiction that lies within the Department of the Environment and Natural Resources county unit, that's responsible for managing and ensuring there is refuse removal and refuse dumps and solid waste disposal in the country. So despite this legal and regulatory framework, there are certain significant irregularities and illegalities with respect to garbage collection and disposal that are carried out by the county government in Nairobi in relation to the status of the dump site and with regards to the operations at the dump site. Just to very briefly highlight the numerous actors who have been involved in addressing this issue within Nairobi County. There is the UN Habitat. The UN Habitat is located in Nairobi, and they have a mandate within their waste management unit to address this issue of waste management across the different countries that they work in. And they do this through developing monitoring waste indicators. And some of these indicators have actually been put to work within the context of Nairobi. And two of the guiding questions that they use to formulate some of their policy interventions with regards to solid waste management is that they try and provide some master planning tools and to address the challenges that they need in order to collect data, because they know that without data, then it's very difficult to manage waste. And so they have developed this tool, which is being referred to as the Waste-Wise Cities tool. And this was more or less developed to enable the county governments that they work with to be able to collect data, and once they have collected it, be able to monitor their data in terms of how they can use it to provide for either investment where it is lacking and where it is needed. And so this tool that they refer to helps them to do surveys, or it provides guidance on how municipalities can do these surveys, questionnaires, as well as criteria. What should be important? What are the significant composition parts of the waste? In the context of Kenya, Nairobi and Mombasa have carried out this survey. For Nairobi, this was done in 2019, and they developed a waste flow diagram, which enabled them to estimate how much waste is being produced. That was through the UN Habitats initiatives with regards to other actors, one of them being JICA. This is the Japan International Cooperation Agency, who have actually developed a master plan of solid waste management in Nairobi. And their role has been to provide some technical support in giving directions. And just to go through one of the main things that they have touched on, because this was their initiative from the late 1990s and carried on to 2010 when they developed the master plan of solid waste management for Nairobi. And two of the core problems that they found out that affect Nairobi was that there was a very low rate of waste collection in the slum areas, and there was lack of financial resources, as well as the issue of illegal and uncontrolled disposal of waste, dumping openly, and the fact that the Dandora dump site needed to be closed, and therefore there was a need to address issues to do with raising public awareness, as well as allocation of budgets towards addressing waste management in Nairobi. And so it's not that there have been insufficient interventions in Nairobi. The question then is, what has been done as a result of these interventions? One of the recommendations that they came up with, or that they put forward, was that this, and this is back in 2011 that they were making these recommendations, that one of the most urgent projects that needed to be addressed was there was a need to improve the Dandora dump site immediately, as well as clean up all the illegal dump sites and collection of waste across the city. And so they made a proposal for the preparation of for the construction of a new sanitary landfill site and for the closure of this Dandora dump site. And what has happened since 2011, and now we're in 2025, is that there's been the proposal to put up the Dandora Waste to Energy Power Station, which is also being called the Nairobi Waste to Energy Power Station. And this is a 45 megawatts waste-fired thermal power plant in Nairobi that has been planned. It's to be owned by the Ministry of Energy, and the power that is to be generated is to be sold to the Kenya Power and Lighting Company for integration into the Kenyan National Power Grid. And at the moment, the project is at the permitting stage, and it's to be developed in a single phase. And the plan is for it to begin this year, with the expectation that it will begin operation next year. However, there's an ongoing case in court, and this has to do with how this contract was issued in terms of the public-private partnership that was developed as a result of this initiative. One of the claims that was put forward with regards to this court case was that the agreement or the contract was given to the private developer without the knowledge of the county assembly. So, there are other issues to do with governance that are related to solid waste management in Nairobi. And so I just wanted to end on this note by raising a question more than an answer and a solution, because I think that's the purpose we are here, is to discuss the way forward. And it's really to look and reflect on what is the level of impact of solid waste studies and solid waste projects, particularly within the context of Kenya's urban areas, and in this case, the case of Nairobi. So as we discuss, probably you could help me with answering that question. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, so we are slightly out of schedule, but not too much, the worst. So maybe we can spend 10 minutes to have a small conversation or debate, questions to raise by the public. So anyone wants to ask something or has any things that want to be elaborated on? I'm sure you're very bright minds of international relations and development students are willing to ask things to our colleagues, of course, and the 4 city students. Some of you coming from Global South with similar challenges. Yeah, Melissa. Yeah.
Yep.
But you need to plug the thing because it will be recorded.
Great. Thank you so much. It's been so stimulating and such interesting talks. I have a question for Margaret. I was wondering in your work, and in particular in this project, given that health and One Health seems to be a big focus, whether you have also taken some kind of broader health perspective or theories around social science in health systems.
We are working on the development of a publication. That's the goal of this period that we are here in Europe. And so part of the team, we are focusing on issues to do with how it's being analyzed or how the impact of this waste is, not only with regards to the humans, but like my colleague, Professor Peter highlighted, that is definitely a perspective that we will consider and bring on board because it does touch on One Health. Yeah, so we will incorporate that. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you very much for the interesting presentations. I was wondering what's the opinion and stance of politicians, of local politicians regarding the state of the dam site? What do they say? Why they can't do anything to close it or to manage it in a better way?
Well, thank you for your question. I think to answer it, it's like a very long story because the political situations in the various urban areas of the country, they differ. Mostly because of the different, you could say, historical development processes that have brought about the urban development in Kenya. We managed to visit the 2 different cities, Nairobi and Nakuru, and you find there were very different approaches to handling waste. And in the context of Nairobi, given that it's the capital city, it's a very politicized space. It's a very hugely contested space. There are very many interests involved. When I say very many interests, what I mean is there are many people who are benefiting out of the situation as it currently is. And therefore, for it to be actually effected in terms of finding a way forward and how to move together as a city is a very convoluted process. And not all actors have been brought on board. Not all actors are on the negotiating table. Whereas when we visited another city, which is a smaller city in Nakuru, you find that the waste speakers have a voice and they have been invited to discuss with the county some of the ways that they could actually consider they could benefit if they were to address the dump site within their jurisdiction. And what you find in the city of Nairobi, because of its scale, first of all, it's a very huge city with about 4.5 million residents. And then secondly, the level of corruption is very high. You know, even now that there's a whole court case because of how the contractor for this new project was awarded is you know, evidence that there are lots of interests involved. It's not a very homogeneous organ, though it's the county government, but there are several interests involved. There are those who are interested in actually delivering, sustainable environmental approaches towards risk management, and there are those who are interested in making business out of this. And so due to those different conflicting interests, you find that processes that should have begun way earlier take way longer. And that's why you find that these are studies that have been done over several years. Their implementation, their enforcements have almost stalled to some extent, you know. It's a hugely contested space in a nutshell.
Rosie.
My question is also to you, Margaret, about, you mentioned the cleanup of illegal dump sites and also of illegal waste collection. And can you talk a bit more about what is deemed illegal as like waste collection and how it impacts like the communities who rely on this waste collecting activities, or has there been any discussions about that?
Yeah, thank you for your question. In Nairobi, because every county, maybe just to make clear first that since 2010, we received a new constitution as a country, and part of this constitution requires that urban development has been devolved to the county governments. It used to be a centralized function within the national government. But now, every county, we have 47 counties in Kenya, is now responsible for managing all their urban issues. And as a result of that devolution, you find that they're all grappling with how to deal with either waste management, water provision, you know, and provision of even the infrastructures to deal with this. And because of that, there's a good sense in that they are all making efforts to urbanize and to manage their cities better. But for sure, the smaller cities are doing a lot much more better in that respect. You know, they are really trying to address some of these glaring gaps, whereas in Nairobi, there's a huge, you could say, backlog, very huge one, particularly with regards to the informal settlements, because they do not have any infrastructure. First of all, they haven't been legally recognized by the county as being spaces for settlement. And therefore, when plans are being carried out, whether it's regards to servicing, they haven't been included. For example, they do not have piped water from the county to these places, let alone garbage collection. So there are several issues. And when we look at informal settlements in the context of a city like Nairobi, we are talking about 60% of a population that is residing within almost 5% of the residential areas. So it's a very hugely disproportionate or unequal in terms of where the majority of the urban citizens reside and their access to basic urban services, whether it's water provision, whether it's waste collection and how it's being managed. So what the County of Nairobi does is that they have three kinds of ways of approaching this. In selected parts of the city, the county manages directly the collection of garbage. And that's mainly in the central business district because, of course, it has an impact on revenues, and therefore they manage that directly. Whereas in the outer parts of the city, they lease that to certain contractors. And those contractors are outsourced by the county, and they are paid. Of course, there's always that challenge of corruption in terms of who are these contractors, how do they get vetted, how are they awarded these contracts. But they are those who are actually outsourced by the county to collect this garbage and deliver it to the dump site, yeah? And then now there is the last category, and these are the private waste suppliers or waste collectors. So these are the entrepreneurs who are now putting up their own businesses. So what ends up happening is that for the rest of the city that is not serviced by the county or by the contractors who have been outsourced by the county, there are these entrepreneuring companies that like startups that they decide, you know, we are a community-based organization or we are a neighborhood association. Let's come together, deal with our waste issues through this company. So these companies are the ones that are now legally recognized or allowed to collect now waste, either it's in the informal settlements or it's in the our neighborhood, like where I live, you know. The city doesn't come there. So what we have is private arrangement in the neighborhood, in the estate, with a company, and they are the ones who come collecting the garbage. So it's more or less the citizens who organize themselves in these groups, either under umbrella associations or through companies that they then agree this is the one that will collect our waste. But what happens is once the waste is collected and it's delivered, in terms of what happens beyond there, that is the issue, because the waste gets collected and dumped in the dump site. And that's where the big problems are coming from, because even if we have these regulations, they're not being enforced from the source, like separation of waste and having that dealt with all the way to where it will end up. So there is a need for enforcement. That's the hugest challenge we are facing, actually, because there are legal frameworks, very good legal frameworks, actually, but enforcement is very weak. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Also a question to Margaret. Following Rosie's question, I was wondering if when you did your research and you spoke with the citizens, often in the informal kind of sector where people pick trash and the whole economy kind of develops and cultures develop, I was wondering if you came across any identity markers that are associated with the kind of work that goes into waste collection and waste cultures, the production of waste cultures, whether caste, class, gendered, or any of the given social and political identity markers that are associated with waste collection.
Thank you for that question. Yes, and there is quite a, you would call it more or less like stigma. I think you can put it that way. And it's not because that it's considered demeaning or anything, but it's more or less because it's a very unprotected kind of job. Yeah. Most times what ends up happening is that those who come into this line of work, do it because of the struggle to get into basic employment. And so they do it out of almost, there's no other place I can be integrated into the labor market, but at least I can earn a decent living. I'm not stealing, I'm not conducting myself in any crime or criminal activities. And so you find that the bulk of the waste pickers do it out of the sheer lack of employment in other sectors, and they want to earn a decent living. Why it is more or less such an issue as of now is because it has not been given that recognition that it requires from the law, from the legal side, for them to be able to actually be integrated when it comes to issues to do with how they work, what are their compensation and all that. So at the moment, it's hugely unregulated. And so it's a question of really survival. Yeah, a majority do this out of the fact that they do not want to get involved in crime, but they are playing a very key role in the city, managing the waste, recycling it, picking it, and all that. But in terms of whether it has developed or grown into an association that can fight for some of this, it's still at its infancy, especially in Nairobi. In Nakuru, the second city we visited, they are further ahead with regards to organizing themselves as waste pickers. So they already have registered themselves in an association they call Nakuru Waste Pickers Association, which is also a member of the Kenyan Waste Pickers Association, which is part of the international association. So in Nairobi, it's still very, it's hugely fragmented. Yeah, and by fragmented, I mean socially. And so before they can become that strong in terms of a voice, it's quite in its infancy, I must say. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Other remarks? Actually, I think we should take a little break now, like a 10-15-minute break for a quick coffee. I want to tell you that the next section we are going to have three lectures. One of them is Ahmed Teguyu, which is I think is going to be very relevant in relation to what Ahmed Teguyu. This is the only one lecturer I haven't met personally. and he's going to talk about, he's Executive Director of Community Action Against Plastic Waste. So he's going to talk about how lobbying international politics to develop international regulations around plastic and returning containers and other measures. And he's an expert in the convention of a small intersectional working group on plastic waste. So I think this is going to be very interesting because it's going to be very applied. And then we have also two young colleagues from our group, which is Insen Gridge, which is an engineer who's been putting sensors everywhere around in Nakuru, precisely, and also in her country, in Morocco. She's an activist and a very interesting person, an engineer, which I think will give a very broadened perspective to this topic we're developing. And also Nick Rayer, which is an anthropologist, which is living in Nakuru. He's studying from an anthropological point of view precisely these issues we're talking about, how workers develop a whole cosmogony and a whole vision of waste in relation to culture, thinking of it as a way of life, as treasure, as a place to be, and also even from an archaeological perspective. So I hope you join us in the second section of this panel and of this symposium, because I think it's going to be very interesting for most of you. And thank you for coming. I hope you have been, it's been interesting for you. We'll see you in 15 minutes, okay?